We are live. Can feel it in my bones.
Good.
So
Wish I
you've
could feel.
got Mel today, 1 hour early with Clyde Hutchinson, is somewhere in Dublin. How are you, my
I'm
friend?
I'm really well. Looking forward to our second lockdown here in Dublin. So
Oh no!
it's
But
similar to.
before we start, Clyde, we have to do the jingle.
All right,
I
do
worked
it.
so hard to prepare this jingle. We have to do the jingle. Hope you like it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Good. Is the world ready? Get a chair, grab a seat, or we'll sweep you off your feet. We move, we groove, you got Mel. Ease your legs, rest a while, all you gotta do is smile. We're swell, can't you tell you got Mel? When the show begins, you better hold on real tight, or before you know it, you'll be high as a kite. Take a break, settle down, we're the only show in town. SRO, don't you know you got Mel? Twice we're a hurricane on ice. What the hell? Give a yell, ring your bell, show and tell. Mademoiselle, give a smell. You got Mel. You've got Mel. And Mel has Clyde Hutchinson. So, sir, start at the beginning.
Really?
Unfreeze. Talk to
The
me.
beginning?
Yeah.
Oh, I should be. I
Your
should be. You should be
childhood,
able to
your
hear me.
childhood, your. Yeah, no, we can all hear you. Start at the
Wow.
beginning.
Jesus. Yeah. So.
Jesus is already too far back. Start with your birth, not with Jesus.
You wanted me to start at the beginning, huh? So yeah,
Well, that's your beginning. Our beginning.
I'm a good Irish boy. I have to have Jesus in there somewhere. Uh, Very simple background. Grew up in Ireland, in the north, right in the sort of the northwest of Northern Ireland. Um, Spent most of my, I suppose, all of my childhood there. Then went to university. Went to university in Belfast. Was a nerdy scientist, similar to yourself, Mel. Studied biochemistry, and then carried on because I couldn't get a job, so I decided to be an academic for a while. Uh, did my PhD in biochemistry, and then decided to start to see the world. From my PhD, I went to Tokyo, spent some time at University of
Mhm.
Tokyo, came back to then Imperial in London, and then did two stints in Cambridge because I tried to leave academia and to get a proper job, as my parents would say. But then I wanted to go back into the warmth of academia. So I spent my first real career as an academic working in mainly in disease diagnostics. My last role was with in ZSL, which is the Institute of Zoology at London Zoo and University of Cambridge, uh, looking at pandemics. So who knew at that time? Nobody thought there was a future in it. Only if I stayed in that. Working on how diseases transmit between animals and humans. And everybody said, that's a really small niche sector. There'll be no future in it. Um, so, so that's to avoid most of the COVID stuff because it was stuff which we did actually see coming down the pathway. But I think people will listen to my former colleagues more when they start to say there's weird and wonderful diseases in these bats. So from that, then I really started to focus in entrepreneurship. I always had a very strong entrepreneurship edge. My parents were entrepreneurs. I always worked a lot of side jobs and had side hustles when I was even in academia. And then I
So one
really,
second. So Clyde, so let's go back to your childhood.
oh, right.
Um,
I might lie down on this sofa. This is therapy.
No, no, you don't have to. Everybody else is going to.
Anyway, Mel, what do you want to
So,
know?
so what? No, no. So your parents. Talk a bit about your parents and growing up in the north of Ireland.
Well, growing up in the Northern Ireland was like, I think,
Did you make your parents? Are your parents proud of you?
yes, of course. My mother's a little bit annoyed that I don't call myself Dr. Clyde in every publication. My parents are proud. My father's unfortunately dead, but my parents always were proud of me, and they're always were the proudest parents. I suppose both my of me and my both my sisters. We're always proud parents. So we never had that kind of never fulfilling their expectations. So I think we always over fulfilled their expectations. And actually, my mother's probably the one who
No,
should tell.
the question is whether you became an academic um, to make them happy or yourself. That's the question.
I became an academic because I am interested in a lot of different subjects. And being an academic, it gives you that opportunity to work in a wide range of topics. And especially if you're a young academic, I think the reason why I did stick in as an academic, because you have to then really stop specialize and specialize and specialize and specialize. And I always thought that was really bizarre because I really was interested in a range of topics. And also you learn from, if you're talking to the scientists 3 doors down, which is digging up dinosaur bones, you learn things from that person which you may not learn if you're become such a specialist. I think there was no pressure for me to become an academic. I think my parents seen academia as an extension of being a student. They didn't quite see postdoc jobs as being anything more than you still doing your PhD. And but I think for me, it was having an environment that you're taught to question. And I think that's why I'm virtually unemployable in a corporate sense, because I like to question ideas. I like to question why do you think that? Why do you come up with that concept? Why
Mhm.
what is behind that? And if you work in a corporate, tendency they don't like people who are saying, why are you doing this? They just like do it. I think that's the
So,
challenge.
so Clyde, you told me that academia wasn't a real job, and today you are a successful entrepreneur with fingers in many pies. We'll talk about that. But so when you left academia, you went to have a real job, didn't you?
I went to work for a consultancy who worked with early stage companies. So how to scale the talent for early stage companies, and it was run by actually a wife and an ex-husband, which was an interesting mix. But the CEO of the firm had a kind of expectation that I would never stay, because he said that I would get bored and run away quickly. But that was a really good opportunity for me to learn a lot of skills, because it was my first real non-academic or policy-driven role, where you were given targets and drills, but also given me a wonderful introduction into the world of venture capital, giving me an understanding of what do venture capitalists look for when they're investing in a company, because 9 times out of 10, my clients were venture capitalists. Once they put in an investment into a company, we were hired to look at how do you scale the talent to enable that company to grow. And also from that really it's shown me, and it added on now where more and more I'm involved in investment programs, is how important people are to the process of not only innovation but how to scale companies, and how important that relationship of the mentality of a founder is really important on how to scale a company and how important getting the right set of people. And if you look throughout history and throughout successful companies, it's been that ignition or that spark of a group of people who have came together and are able to not only develop their ideas but able to grow companies. And it's always been the people who've done it, not necessarily the technology.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way for you to know that a certain founder is going to stay the course and be able to scale a company,
That's the
or
title. That's
somebody
the title.
that you're gonna get rid of in a year or two?
Well, I think there's that's $1 billion question. So if we're going to all pick winners, we'd all bet on the right horse as such. I think there's clues of founders who have a mentality, so that they have a very clear vision of where they see this opportunity going. They can see what they have to get there. I think some of the challenges we have these days is there's a lot of startup gurus out there which tell people that they don't listen to anybody says, be tenacious, carry on. Your opinion is the best opinion. So that to me is also a really weakness in some founders where they are completely unmentorable and just don't listen because they feel by taking on other people's advice that will tarnish their vision, and it means that they will corrupt their grand plan. Where the most successful companies founders are tenacious and will keep to their vision, but they will look and take on board what people say. But I think more and
So you
more
have
where
to
I
have a
see,
strong
especially
personality.
maybe not, yeah, maybe not with an Israeli founders are a little bit a special breed, where you don't need to teach them tenaciousness. The chutzpah is very strong, but I think the more so in for the last number of years I've been working in Latin America and also in Europe, it's that growth mentality, how to scale your company, and having that in place quickly. And I'm seeing more and more people trying to develop that. I've got a friend who's a professor of entrepreneurship in IE Business School, and that's where um, he really will state that people need to really grasp this growth mentality and think about how to grow their company. So I think for me, that's the kind of skills you look for. But again, there's not a magic formula. And if it's the magic formula, as I said, I would be, I'd be calling you from my hilltop villa if I had the magic formula. But I think there's some commonality.
Okay, so we want to talk about two things: your love of Israel, and also how you went from biochemistry into sports technology, which I find intriguing. I
And
don't
now,
know whether they're connected.
a lot of, well, they are. Like, I think the sports, I think the sports side is probably where I think my partner here in Journey Partners would call it our cost center. So I think it's, for me, it's always been a passion. And looking at sports technology, there has been a complete revolution of the quantified athlete. So everything which can be potentially measured can be measured. And it's just coming as a biochemist where you're used to systems, like looking at an athlete as a system and being able to tweak, so either how the nutrition is or how how much an athlete trains, or how much they rest, or how much they sleep, or the types of materials they wear, and the sensors that you can detect is really fascinating, because not only does sports technology make better athletes, it's now starting to filter down into everyday consumer wear, where you see them, a vast majority of people having some sort of quantified sensor, be it how many steps they've walked, to wearing Fitbits, to wearing some form of sensor which quantifies their health in some shape or form. And a lot of that technology has came out of the sports technology arena. Uh, but it's a difficult area. And I think sports tech to be driven by people who are really passionate, but maybe not driven by commercial realities of the situation. And I've, like everybody else, has had my fingers burnt in sports technology, because you have people who are willing to work for free, or people which will ploy a lot of their money because they're just passionate about that sport, rather than if it's commercial or not. And that's the same spirit as fans have around sports.
Mhm. It sounds like we could draw an analogy with educational tech, with Edtech. Or am I wrong
Yeah.
here?
Well, edtech's slightly different. Edtech, the challenges with edtech is, especially with the startups I've encountered, it tends to be, I'm a teacher, I have came up with something which is a technology, it works in my school, so I expect then it will work in every other school, and it can be tricky. And it's kind of a tricky market to scale products. And you know yourself, you've been involved in education a lifetime. So it's a very fickle marketplace as well.
Absolutely. And we met through Yossi Vardi, and talk about, please, your love for Israel. I mean, I know your love for Ireland, and we love Ireland, and you're very involved in Irish promoting Irish technology. But why Israel? Why Yossi Vardi?
Well, I think Yossi is probably one of the biggest connectors on this planet. I think he's connected virtually everybody I know to somebody else that I know through an event or a gallery or a internet or another activity which Yossi has been involved with. And now it's been really good to see how it's still carrying on, because I think a lot of us felt with COVID that connection we were finding with interesting people, and that's what Yossi has done. Like both myself and Brian, who works in Journey Partner, go to different internets, and I know you know Brian as well, so you met Brian at the internet. So the
Portugal, I think.
the yeah, so it's been that bringing together of really interesting people, but not people with the same mindsets, not people from the same area. And that for me is a really important way of how to spark ideas, spark new projects, spark collaborations. And I think the reason why Israel has fascinated me is the same reason why Israel fascinates a lot of people who are involved in innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's really entrepreneurs, which is almost unique. Um, and also, I look at the way Israeli and the Jewish diaspora are able to activate their diaspora and their connections to their network. And then I look to the Irish connections, where, as you well know, there's an Irish person in every single city of the world. We're a wandering population, and see how can we, as an Irish population, how can we learn for how well connected and how well flexed the Jewish and the Israeli networks are in helping business. And still to today, I think Israeli entrepreneurs move at a speed which is unrivaled elsewhere. But I think that's due to the very special conditions which Israel finds itself in. I don't think that's a lot of other countries would say, how can we copy the startup nation model? I don't think you can copy it, but there's a certain lessons you can look at in terms of working at speed, working at a bootstrap nature to get to speed, because you need to get to speed because you need to get the funding for a product. But also, how can you effectively use your network? And that's where people like Jossie have been really good, because they've been enabling that the world to come to Israel for events such as DLD, but also showing a showcase on bringing groups of people together who have went on to do collaborative projects. And I think all of us who have went to either DLD or Kindernets or other events have made hundreds of connections and have had follow-up conversations just like today because of that connection made by Yossi.
But here's the thing, Clyde. We're friends, but we don't work together. We don't invest. I don't invest in you. You don't invest in me.
Came up with a
What
cocktail.
kind of business is that? Just having a friend.
So I think the benefit of talking like Mel, you're one of the, like, you're a source of inspiration, and I think that's just by talking to you, you can spark a lot of ideas in my mind, and also because we're same but different. So we come from a very similar background in terms of academia, and then have spread our interests far, but really are looking at that kind of where's the sparks happening? How can the sparks ignition? How can you look at education around innovation? How can you promote people to come up with new ideas? And I think, like, every time I have a conversation with you, I learn stuff. And I think that's where I think most people feel are in their own lane, or some people that they can do business with. I'm a believer that you should have a wide range of people you can talk to, because you never know where that spark or that moment of inspiration will come from. Like I would be still drinking whiskey without supplements if if I had met you. So there's a whole there's a whole new range of things. But I think it's valuable to often
Um,
talk outside their own little bubble. And I think this is one of my concerns about COVID, is that because people have more and more went into their own social bubbles, that it's going to be harder for people to mix and meet new people and have those conversations.
but on the other hand, it's incredible that we can talk over Zoom. I mean, we haven't met in several years.
Yeah,
And you sent Brian to the last Keen Internet. I haven't seen you in 2 or 3 years. We have not drunk whiskey together with
that's what I
the
mean.
active ingredient for quite a while.
Yeah, no, I've been in South America. I actually, it's been quite a while. I've been able to. The good thing about COVID, it's been the longest I've been home. Actually, the longest I've been in Ireland in nearly 30 years. So it's been really good for me to have this period of time to be back at home, because I was always traveling. And actually, this year, at the start of this year, I had made a commitment to myself to stop traveling so much, because last year I did over 250 flights, which is an insane amount of traveling. And you find yourself not making connections with people and not being able to talk to people, because you're either in a different time zone, or you're in meetings, or uh, because I was working in South America, then I was in different time zones, and also I was, when I got home, then it was all right. I have to go to a conference or I have to do something else. So I was finding myself that I was less and less actually being at home, and when I was home, it was quick laundry change and change my bags and flying somewhere else. So I think that's been one thing around COVID I really have enjoyed, and it's given me an opportunity to reconnect with people because I've actually not been traveling or not been physically on a plane.
Yeah. So Clyde, you are one of the most peripatetic people I know of all the globetrotters. You compete with Yossi Vardy probably successfully. Um, so how many companies are you involved with, and why do you need to
Um,
be involved with so many?
well, no, I think the at the moment we've really have focused our attentions in two main areas. So we have decided that our really for the next number of years we're going to focus on what we called airland and sea transportation and trade, and really start to look at how we can develop new companies which have either a solution around making airland and sea transportation and trade sustainable, but also how can we start to look at making them more efficient in terms of digital transformation. So previously, both myself and Brian, ran a fund called Propeller, which we invested in 19 companies for everywhere from LA in the west to Dubai in the east. And we've really learned how to invest in early stage companies. Like one of the companies we invested in was 3 weeks old, and when they were their first ever pitch was to us. Luckily, that company's went on
Wow.
to invest to just complete a financing round during COVID. But for us,
Wow.
it, it was a brilliant company because it was three aircraft pilots who there was something in their cockpit which had been irritating them for 20 years, and they decided to fix it. So they came to us and said, well, we hate the way pilots communicate because you've eight different forms of communication, and the way pilots communicate hasn't changed since the 1930s. We're still using VHF radios, so why are we still doing this? So they've created a unifying technology, which you may have heard of, which is voice over the internet, to use. And thanks to one of our friends, Jeff, you can use freely to communication with they came to us with that solution already done within 3 weeks. So they were, as I said, that kind of stuff really inspires us. The stuff where people come with a solution to a problem. And well, actually, this has been something I know irritates us. And I think one of the big challenges is that unless we're able to travel and new people and make those connections. And for us, that's where we see the biggest challenge is how do we make travel and trade and the logistics and the supply chains emission free so that it's going to be possible for the future for your grandchildren and everybody's future that we maintain if we're not able, society is going to be a lot weakened. And obviously, I'm being selfish, as you said, I'm somebody who travels a lot. But I think for us, that's really going to be our focus. And we're currently raising uh, around that in our second fund, which hopefully we're going to launch next year. So for us, that's what we're really down on. But for me, entering early stage companies across a range of fields, and recently I've been really involved in looking at maritime companies where my father used to have a boat. I've learned to really enjoy. So yeah, I work with a lot of companies, but I don't have any children, so I've got lots of time to work with these companies, and we're under lockdown, so I have even more time to talk to people.
But Clyde, between you and me, you've done well as an entrepreneur and investor.
Uh,
Uh, you could sit back.
I was gonna go. I make a living.
Exactly. You could sit back and start lecturing to university students again. You could write a book for young entrepreneurs like me. You could spend more time promoting Irish tech to the world. There's a lot of things you could do. In other words, I guess my question, knowing you and you're such a rich individual, um, isn't it time to take more care of Clyde?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's why we've really sat down and focused, because the the benefit of COVID is actually giving you that chance to see the world at a pause, but also see yourself at a pause. And I think when during March of this year, when 75% of what I had been doing had suddenly disappeared, as in terms of projects and the future plans of what we're doing, it actually gave me a chance to sit back and go, what do I want to do? And I think that's where the real focus on, let's spend the third act of my career, of my life, really focusing on the sustainability and keep that focus going. But saying that, I I have a brain where I love people coming to me with problems or people coming up with solutions, and I'll still do that on the side. But I think more and more you have to look at running at 100%, and the amount of welfare calls I've had since I haven't been able to travel, from people going, are you okay? Because most of the people have expected that I've built a model of an airplane in my bedroom and I'm sitting in a cramped seat watching a movie from a little thing, just to make sure that I get the experience of traveling. But I think that's been really good, because I have had a chance to actually go, what you want to do. I can't write a book because I'm dyslexic and it take too long. It'd be my idea of hell, writing a book. But
Clyde,
I
that's
am
an
still.
excuse. That's an excuse. You can dictate a book to Mr. Google, and he'll type it out
No,
for you.
trust me.
Come
Trust
on,
me.
man.
I'm too easily distracted. It would be.
That's another thing. That's another thing. There's medications for that also. But I mean, I as
I would
somebody
I would need to be
as somebody
kept in a
as
room
some,
without internet. Yeah, no,
as
no.
somebody with
Yeah,
ADHD, I understand, but I would rather you not take the Ritalin and continue to be yourself. But maybe the way I find you now, I've never seen you so relaxed, and you know, that's wonderful. So, do you think that
I think
when
it's
this is,
the sorry, no, what?
yeah, I was saying when this is over, do you think that we are going to learn some lessons here and travel less and zoom more and be more connected to ourselves than this, a rat race that we've been involved in?
It's interesting because I think travel is going to change. I think people are no longer going to travel for short periods of time. There's going to be longer trips. People are going to spend. If I say I want go to Georgia, I may want to go and I'm having a couple of meetings. Well, maybe I'll spend a month working there rather than just making one trip. And I think now that working can be done now that the world has got over the fact that you need to be in an office, you can work any majority of roles, especially in the technology sectors, are you can do that role anywhere. So why will I be somewhere where it's expensive, I'm not connecting with nature, or I'm not happy when I can be anywhere in the world? And I think that's going to be travel. I think because very few people have traveled, that the joy of travel will come back as well. And I think people will start to see how they may have taken for granted the wonders of being able to travel. And I think that will come back. But also, I think people will travel in bubbles. So I think people will travel with groups of their friends or their families rather than be involved with groups of strangers. I think there's a long held now distrust of people. I know in Israel, because it's very hard to tell Israelis what to do, and I still cannot really understand what you're supposed to do in the beach in Tel Aviv now. You're allowed to play tennis, but you're not allowed to. I don't know. There needs to be a book to explain that. But I think
Clyde, you know,
people.
sorry, the irreverence that
Go
you
ahead.
talked about earlier, the chuppah, is good for the startup nation. It's bad for the COVID nation. We're doing very
Yeah.
poorly because you know, people here are used to not taking authority.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I've
you know,
always
if you
said that.
say you can't play with a rubber ball, they say, "Oh, this is a falafel," you know.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that it's going to be society, cultures. Anybody's handled COVID particularly well. Like we're sitting here and over 1,000 cases a day, um, and this is us who have been one of the more stricter nations, and with a population which has been largely compliant. But after 6 months, young people will still want to still want to meet and still want to go out and meet each other. It's impossible to homeschool kids for a long period of time. So I think society is never going to behave perfectly. But I always would say you can always tell an Irish person or an Israeli in London, because there's when you go into the tube where it has that stand behind the yellow line, you can see both the Irish and the Israeli stamping over it just because you can't tell me what to do. So there's always going to be a challenge there. But I think and I was just discussing this with I have friends who work for a company called Populous, who these are the people who build airports and build sports stadiums. And we really need to look at this as being a global reset for people. So we really need to look at how, once activities come together, how can we remove things which have been problematic? And that's why I said we've been starting to look at, well, travel, the concepts around travel haven't really changed in a long period of time. How can we make travel more sustainable and more responsible? And how can we make tourists more responsible so that they're not creating the damage which we have been seeing in beautiful cities such as Venice and Barcelona and other places where they were starting to really suffer from over tourism? And how can we make travel benefit all members of society when they're going to visit small island nations and places which are more highly dependent on tourism? So for me, I think that it would be, if history looks back to this and we don't use this as a moment, as a point of reflection and how to improve things, then we really missed an opportunity. Because I'm now saying this, hopefully I'm touching the weed on my table here, that we would have to go through this again, because we've learned that lesson. But this is a golden opportunity to really reset, because it's already changed fundamentally how we'll work. It's changing fundamentally how people have conferences. It's changed fundamentally how people work internationally. So how can we start to make this more of a force for good? How can we use this reset that we're not going to go back to the bad behaviors which we've had before?
So, Clyde, is there anything that I haven't asked you because we're near the end of the show?
I'm not sure. We haven't talked about food or drink. That's that's the two my two big pleasures. That's the one bad thing about COVID. I've started to cook a lot more and I've ate too much.
Ah,
So
okay. No, because see,
that's
I'm a
the
lousy cook, so I'm losing weight, you see.
well, that must be difficult for you
No,
though.
I'm joking
Not being
because my
able.
wife is actually cooking, and it's but we're eating healthy food, and we are losing weight slowly. So it can be done.
But
It
not being
can
able
be done. So
to freeze and stuff.
so Clyde, before
Who
we
knows?
finish, first of all, you mentioned Jeff Pulver, whom the whole world
Yeah.
owes gratitude for keeping Skype and Zoom and Facebook Live and voice over IP free for the whole world to use. And then we should also mention Alon Cohen, the son of Haggai Cohen, who invented it in the first place,
Yeah.
together with his buddy in Haggai's garage
Yeah.
25 years ago.
I don't know. I think
It hasn't worked splendidly.
that's because I'm in my brick dungeon here, which let's
Exactly. So,
I
so
still have.
I like to finish off by asking my friends about the Beatles. You grew up in the north of Ireland.
Yep.
Liverpool isn't too far away.
Nope.
What do you think? What do you think about the Beatles?
Um, See, the Beatles wasn't a like my parents wouldn't play the Beatles. I remember I have a very vivid memory of being in a summer camp, and they're one of the few LPs which was there. You may have to explain what an LP is, but uh,
I'll go get one.
record, one of the
A record.
yes, was Eleanor Rigby, and I've always Eleanor Rigby has always been a trigger for me when I hear it now of those summer days when you're a kid and the summers which never seem to end. So as that always has brought joy to me. That song. I know
So,
it's not a particularly happy song.
no, can you hum a few
So, but
bars for our audience?
oh, I am not.
Oh, come on,
Absolutely
everybody
not.
does.
That's horrible.
Eleanor Rigby.
No, I'm no.
Clyde,
I would be arrested.
all right.
The COVID police would be around
It's been spectacular seeing
me.
you. You have 100 companies to run. I'm going to love you and leave you, and just hope that, given everything we talked about, we can still sit down and have our special whiskey, face to face, in
Yes.
a great hug, here or
Yeah.
wherever in the near future.
Yeah. It's great talking to you, man, as always. Thank you
So
very
our
much
love to
for
you
giving
and
me the
to
opportunity.
our Irish friends who are or sometimes more similar to the Israelis than we care to believe. But
Yes, just don't tell them that. All right. Thank you very much, Mel.
take care, my friend.
Bye.